The night my mother-in-law sent my 4-month-old daughter to the emergency room, she did not look angry afterward. That is the detail I remember most clearly. A minute earlier, Marjorie Callahan had been furious enough to drive both hands into my shoulders while I was holding Sadie. I stumbled backward into the edge of a dresser, lost my grip, and watched my baby hit the hardwood between us. But once Sadie stopped crying, Marjorie's face settled. Her voice did too. "Don't make this bigger than it is, Erin." My daughter was lying on the floor. I was 32 years old, barefoot, shaking, and still trying to understand how a person could stand over an injured baby and worry first about the story. I wish I could say that was the moment I understood everything. It wasn't. The full truth came 3 hours later at St. Luke's Children's Hospital in Boise, when a doctor showed me images from Sadie's skeletal survey and pointed to 2 healing fractures in her ribs. They were not from that night's fall. They were older. One looked nearly a month old. That meant the danger had started long before I admitted we were in danger at all. To explain how I ended up in Marjorie's house in Meridian, Idaho, I have to go back to the winter before Sadie was born. My husband, Luke, had worked maintenance for a regional wind energy contractor for almost 7 years. The company paid well when the contracts were steady, but the work came in blocks, 12 days at a site, 4 or 5 days home, then gone again. When the company lost a major service agreement, Luke spent 6 weeks without a paycheck just as my pregnancy moved into the expensive part. I was a curriculum coordinator at a small Montessori school, and my maternity leave was technically protected, which sounded comforting until I learned that most of it would be unpaid. We had savings, but not the kind of savings that can absorb rent, insurance, a birth, a dead refrigerator, and 6 weeks of missed income without beginning to resemble a countdown. Marjorie offered us her basement suite before Luke finished asking. Her house sat at the end of a quiet subdivision where every lawn looked measured. She had lived there alone since Luke's father died 11 years earlier. There were 3 bedrooms upstairs, a finished basement downstairs, a fenced yard, and a 2-car garage that held 1 immaculate Buick and shelves of labeled plastic bins. "You would be foolish to waste money on rent when family has space," she said. It was supposed to be temporary. 5 months, maybe 6. We would pay for groceries, build our deposit fund back up, and move into our own place before I returned to work in August. I agreed for practical reasons. I also agreed for an emotional reason I did not tell Luke. My mother had died from an aneurysm when I was 16. My father did his best after that, but he was a quiet man who believed grief was a private chore. He died when I was 27. By the time I became pregnant, I had learned how to enter every new stage of adulthood without the person I most wanted to call. Marjorie had never been warm exactly, but she was organized, competent, certain. During my pregnancy, she sent me articles, knitted a gray blanket, and once drove across town because I mentioned that the grocery store near us was out of the ginger tea I liked. I mistook attention for tenderness. When we moved into her house, I carried boxes downstairs and an old hunger with me. I thought maybe becoming a mother would give me a mother again. Sadie was born in early April after 19 hours of labor and an emergency vacuum assist that left me exhausted in a way sleep could not fix. She weighed 6 pounds, 9 ounces. She had Luke's dark eyebrows and a tiny crescent-shaped birthmark behind her left ear. The first night home, Marjorie heated soup, folded the hospital blankets, and took the trash out without being asked. For 3 days, I thought I had been wrong about every uneasy feeling I'd ever had around her. On the 4th day, she began correcting how I held my daughter. Support her higher. On the 5th, she started timing feedings. She's not hungry again. It's only been 90 minutes. By the end of the first week, there was a whiteboard on the refrigerator with columns for ounces, naps, diaper changes, and fussy periods. Marjorie wrote in blue marker. If I filled in a number she disliked, she circled it. At first I laughed. Are we running a laboratory? Marjorie smiled without humor. New mothers forget things. I told myself she was trying to help. That became my favorite lie. She had rules for everything. Bottles had to face labels forward in the refrigerator. Burp cloths belonged in a wicker basket beside the couch, not on the chair. The stroller could not be left open in the mudroom because it made the house look cluttered from the garage. She disliked Sadie sleeping on me because, according to her, babies who were allowed to win beca. Me impossible. The phrase bothered me. Allowed to win. Sadie was 12 days old. When Luke was home, Marjorie softened. She brought him coffee. She told him how hard I was working. She took pictures of us together and said, "Look at my little family." When Luke left for a turbine site outside Rock Springs, Wyoming, the compliments stopped before his truck reached the interstate. That night, Sadie woke at 1:30. I was nursing her in the basement bedroom when Marjorie came downstairs without knocking. You're going to make yourself sick. I'm okay. You haven't slept. I'll sleep after she eats. Marjorie held out her arms. I said, no, thank you. She stepped closer anyway. Don't turn help into a power struggle. I remember that sentence because it was the first time I heard the machinery underneath the kindness. I kept Sadie against my chest. I said I'm okay. Marjorie stared at me for several seconds, then gave a small laugh. Of course, you're the mother. She said it as if I had announced a temporary job title. The next morning, she told Luke on the phone that I was touchy from hormones. He laughed gently and said, Mom means well. Just ignore the parts that annoy you. I wanted to. I really did. Ignoring Marjorie was impossible because she did not need permission to enter a room, move an object, cancel a plan, or take a baby from someone's arms. She simply behaved as if the permission had already been granted by the fact that the roof belonged to her. The first time I woke and found Sadie's bassinet empty, panic pulled me upright before I was fully awake. Upstairs, I found Marjorie in her sewing room with Sadie asleep against her chest. What are you doing? Letting you rest. You took her without waking me. You were asleep. That is exactly why you should have woken me. Sadie stirred. Marjorie lowered her voice. Look at yourself, Erin, you're shaking. I was, from fear. She noticed the symptom and assigned her own cause. When I told Luke, he sighed. I could hear wind roaring over the microphone on his end. She shouldn't have taken Sadie without telling you, he said. I'll talk to her. Then came the sentence that let him avoid doing anything harder. But you know how she is. I knew how she was. What I did not yet understand was how much damage can hide inside a family phrase everyone has agreed not to examine. By May, I had begun measuring my days by what I could prevent. I prevented Marjorie from adding rice cereal to Sadie's bottle after our pediatrician said she was too young. I prevented her from placing a blanket over the bassinet because she thought the room was cold. I prevented her from taking Sadie to visit a friend without asking me first. Every boundary became a debate, and every debate ended with Marjorie behaving as if my refusal were evidence of instability. She rarely yelled. That made it harder to explain. She preferred sentences delivered while wiping a counter or sorting mail. You make everything tense. You're creating problems where there aren't any. You should ask yourself why you need so much control. The last one almost made me laugh. Instead, I went downstairs and cried in the shower so quietly I could barely breathe. I was tired, lonely, financially cornered, and ashamed of how frightened I had become of a woman who wore pearl studs to the supermarket. Before Sadie, I had believed that once you recognized mistreatment, you simply left. Then I became a woman with a newborn, little money, an absent husband, no parents to call, and a house key that belonged to someone else. My confidence did not disappear at once. It leaked. The first bruise appeared near Sadie's right hip. It was small, dark at the center, and impossible to explain. Sadie was not rolling yet. She was not mobile. She had never fallen. I took a picture beside a quarter for scale. When I asked Marjorie if anything had happened, she did not look surprised. She bucked while I was changing her. I had to keep her from twisting off the pad. How hard did you hold her? Marjorie's mouth tightened, hard enough to keep her safe. I made an appointment with Dr. Samuel Park the next morning. He examined Sadie carefully and asked who cared for her. Mostly me, I said. Sometimes my mother-in-law. Daycare. No. He looked again at the mark. Bruising in a baby who isn't independently mobile deserves attention. It doesn't automatically mean something terrible happened, but document anything else you see. The word document stayed with me. That afternoon, I bought a small indoor camera with money from my tutoring account. I told Luke I wanted him to be able to check in on Sadie from job sites. That was true. It was not the whole truth. The camera sat on a bookshelf across from the crib. It had motion alerts, night vision, a memory card, and an optional cloud plan. I subscribed to the cloud plan using an old email address I had kept FR. College, because I did not want another household bill appearing on the family tablet. Marjorie noticed the camera immediately. So now we're recording each other. It's for Luke. Of course it is. She looked directly into the lens for 2 seconds, then left the room. For the next week, she was careful. That should have told me. She understood exactly what the camera was for. Instead, I let the calm soothe me. Then the car broke down. It was not dramatic. No smoke, no collision. The transmission simply stopped cooperating in the parking lot of a grocery store while Sadie screamed in the back seat. The repair estimate was $2,300. Luke and I had saved $3,800 toward moving. After the car, we had $1,500 and change. I sat at Marjorie's kitchen island that night with my banking app open and felt the future slide farther away. She poured herself sparkling water. "You know," she said, "there's no shame in admitting you need family." I looked up. She smiled. "You keep acting like you're waiting to escape." "I am waiting to move." Same thing, apparently. A week later, she placed a manila folder beside my breakfast plate. Inside was a list of shared household expenses: utilities, increased water use, internet, groceries, a monthly lodging contribution we had never discussed. The total was $1,280. I thought it had to be a mistake. We agreed we'd buy groceries. We agreed you would contribute. No, you offered us the basement so we could save. And you've saved, haven't you? There are arguments where both people are discussing the same facts, and there are arguments where one person is moving the walls. I called Luke. He was halfway through a night shift in eastern Oregon. I could hear an alarm beeping behind him. "It's not worth a war," he said. "Pay it, I'll replace it." "With what? We are trying to leave." "I know." "No, Luke, I don't think you do." He went quiet. Then, "She's my mother, Erin. She's not trying to trap us." I closed my eyes. That word had not come from me. He had supplied it himself. I paid Marjorie the next morning because I was afraid she would throw us out before I had another plan. I hated paying her, but anger was becoming useful once I stopped spending all of it on shame. I called my closest friend, Danielle Price. Danielle and I had met 6 years earlier at a literacy nonprofit. She was now a respiratory therapist at a children's hospital in Nampa, worked impossible hours, and had the kind of voice that made nonsense embarrassed to stay in the room. We met at a diner off Eagle Road. I brought Sadie. I told Danielle almost everything. She did not interrupt until I described waking to an empty bassinet. Then she put down her fork. "Why didn't you call me?" The question hurt because there was no accusation in it. I thought I was overreacting. According to who? I looked at her. Danielle nodded once. Exactly. I showed her the bruise photo. I told her about the expense invoice. I told her how Marjorie talked about my hormones whenever I disagreed with her. Danielle did not say, "Leave right now," because she understood that leaving requires a door you can actually walk through. Instead, she gave me options. Her guest room was available. Her sister could lend me a portable crib. A coworker knew a family law attorney. If I needed to store documents or cash, I could keep them at Danielle's apartment. "I'm serious," she said. "You don't need to prove she's evil before you're allowed to feel unsafe." That sentence rearranged something inside me. I had been waiting for a courtroom-level reason to trust my own discomfort. I did not know a courtroom was coming. 2 days later, I saw the first video. I was downstairs answering emails from the Montessori school when my phone buzzed with a motion alert. Sadie had been napping. I opened the app expecting to see her stirring. Marjorie stood over the crib. Sadie was crying. Marjorie reached in, lifted her too quickly by the torso, and pulled her against her chest with a force that made Sadie's head snap backward before it settled against her shoulder. My mouth went dry. Then Marjorie squeezed. Not a hug. A compression, Her forearm wrapped around Sadie's back while the other hand pressed her in. Sadie's cry changed pitch. Marjorie hissed something. The microphone caught only part of it. Enough, you're fine. I watched the 14-second clip 4 times. On the 5th, I saved it to my phone. Then I made a mistake. I confronted her. I went upstairs holding the phone and said, "I need you to see this." She watched without blinking. "That is too rough," I said. "You cannot handle her like that." Marjorie handed the phone back. "You've been filming a tired grandmother helping with a colicky baby, and now you're studying frames like a detective." Her head snapped back. "She is fine." "You squeezed her." Marjorie's ex. Pression changed then, not to guilt but calculation. She leaned against the counter. "You know what worries me?" I should have walked away. Instead, I asked, "What?" "You." I laughed once because the alternative was screaming. She continued, "You cry all the time. You barely eat. You watch that baby breathe while she sleeps. You don't trust anyone. If an outsider saw how anxious you've become, they might have questions." I felt the room go cold. She was not defending herself anymore. She was showing me the weapon she had prepared. At her book club at church with neighbors, Marjorie had spent weeks describing me as overwhelmed. Fragile, postpartum, nervous. She did not have to invent every detail. I was overwhelmed. I did cry. I did check Sadie's breathing. That was what made the lie efficient. It was built from real pieces, with the meaning changed. That night, I sent the clip to Danielle and changed every password I had. I also started a timeline. Date, time, what happened, who was present, photo attached, video saved. I hid a paper copy inside the spare tire compartment of my car. For the first time since moving into Marjorie's house, I stopped trying to convince her to respect me. I started preparing for the possibility that she never would. Between incidents, the house could look perfectly normal. Dinner, laundry, weather reports, Marjorie watering petunias and waving to neighbors. Sometimes she brought me coffee exactly the way I liked it, and for 10 minutes I wondered whether I had exaggerated everything. Then she would remind me that peace in that house belonged to her. One afternoon, I came home from a pharmacy run and heard Sadie crying upstairs. Not ordinary fussing. The breathless, exhausted cry of a baby who has been calling for someone. Marjorie was in the sunroom reading. Why is she crying? She needs to learn that crying doesn't summon an audience. I ran upstairs. The nursery door was closed. When I tried the handle, it would not open. For 1 second, I thought it had jammed. Then I saw the old-fashioned privacy latch turned from the hallway side using a narrow emergency key Marjorie kept above the doorframe. I unlocked it. Sadie was red-faced and damp with sweat, kicking inside the crib. I picked her up and held her until my own breathing slowed. Downstairs, I said, "You will never lock that door again." Marjorie did not look away from her book. It was 12 minutes. I don't care if it was 12 seconds. That kind of drama is exactly what I'm talking about. I took the emergency key off the top trim and put it in my pocket. The next morning, it was gone from my purse. That was when I stopped believing we had 6 weeks. I called Danielle and asked if her guest room was still available. Yes, I may need it sooner than I thought. Then comes sooner. I need a few days. It's okay, but Erin. Yeah. Don't let needing a plan become a reason to stay after the plan has expired. I wrote that down too. The following weekend, while Marjorie attended a garden club fundraiser, I started packing documents. Birth certificates, insurance cards, Sadie's medical records, my passport, the small envelope of cash I had rebuilt from 2 tutoring sessions. I found the family history by accident. Marjorie kept old cookbooks in a cabinet above the refrigerator, the kind no one used because recipes now lived on phones. I pulled one down looking for an envelope where I could hide copies of documents until I drove them to Danielle's. A folded letter slipped from between the pages. I recognized Marjorie's handwriting immediately, only younger, less controlled. The letter was dated November 1994 and addressed to Cynthia. I should have put it back. I didn't. The first paragraph was ordinary. Luke had a cold. Frank was working late. Snow had started early. Then one sentence stopped me. Gloria put me and the baby in the utility room again because he screamed during supper. Gloria, Luke's paternal grandmother. I kept reading. Marjorie had written that the utility room was unheated, that Luke was 6 months old, that Gloria told her she could come back into the house when she learned what a mother is for. Marjorie wrote that Frank had said nothing when he came home. She wrote, "I think if I complain, they'll say I can't manage him." My knees weakened. There were 3 more letters in the cookbook. In one, Marjorie described Gloria taking over feedings and calling her incompetent. In another, she wrote that she wanted to leave but had nowhere to go. The last ended with a sentence that made me close my eyes. Maybe the trick is to stop expecting kindness. I put every letter back exactly as I found it. For the rest of the day, I could not look at Marjorie without seeing 2 women at once. The one in front of me controlled my food, my money, my baby, and the story other people heard about me. Behind her stood a frightened young mother with no money and no ally. That knowledge complicated my anger. It did not cancel it. A few nights later, Marjorie made that distinction for me. Sadie had been fussy after dinner. Marjorie stood at the sink rinsing a bottle and said, without looking at me, Luke was worse at her age. I waited. She continued. His grandmother believed babies manipulate weak women. I said carefully, that sounds cruel. Marjorie's hands stopped under the running water. For a moment, I thought she might tell me the truth herself. Instead, she shut off the faucet. It made me stronger. There it was. Not healing. Conversion. What had been done to her had become proof of what other women should survive. I understood then why sympathy could not be the same thing as access. I could grieve for the young woman Marjorie had been and still refuse to hand her my daughter. The next morning, I called the attorney Danielle had recommended. Her name was Simone Greer. She had spent years representing parents in dependency cases before moving into private family practice. I gave her the short version. She asked 3 questions. Do you have somewhere safe to go? Yes. Does your husband know you may leave? Not yet. Does your mother-in-law have any legal guardianship rights? No. Then prepare quietly. Don't announce a departure until you're ready to complete it. She told me to preserve evidence in original form. She told me not to bait Marjorie into incidents. She told me to keep Sadie with me as much as possible and call emergency services if I believed she was in immediate danger. I wanted Simone to tell me I was definitely right. Instead, she gave me something better. Procedure. Fear becomes more manageable when it has tasks. I moved copies of the camera clips to encrypted storage. I left clothes at Danielle's. I filled Sadie's diaper bag with enough supplies for 2 days and kept it in the trunk. I also told Luke. That conversation went worse than I hoped and better than I feared. He was home for 4 days between contracts. We sat in his truck in a supermarket parking lot because I did not trust the walls at Marjorie's house. I showed him the saved clip. He watched it twice. His jaw tightened. That looks bad. It is bad. I mean, the angle could make it look. I stared at him. He stopped. I told him about the locked nursery, the missing key, the bruise, the threat about my mental state. Luke rubbed both hands over his face. I'll talk to her. No. What do you mean, no? I mean, this is past a talk. So what are you saying? Sadie and I are going to Danielle's. His head snapped toward me. You're leaving me. I am leaving your mother's house. That's not what this will look like. The sentence told me exactly where his attention had gone. What it looks like to whom? He opened his mouth, then closed it. I said, Luke, I need you to hear me without translating this into an attack on your mother. I am scared to leave our daughter alone with her. He stared through the windshield. Finally, he said, my mom can be controlling. She can be impossible, but she would never hurt a baby. You just watched her hurt a baby. I watched her pick Sadie up too hard. How much harder does it need to get? He flinched. I hated that part of me felt sorry for him. Luke loved Sadie. I knew that. He loved me too, in the incomplete way people sometimes love while still protecting the system that taught them what love means. He was not cruel. He was loyal to denial. And denial was becoming dangerous. He asked me to wait until his next rotation ended, 9 days away. He said we would find a short-term rental together. I agreed to 4 days. It was a compromise I would later regret. On the second day, Marjorie sabotaged my job. My school director, Melissa Grant, emailed to say she was disappointed I had decided not to return for fall orientation and that she wished me well. I read the message twice before understanding it. I had not resigned. I called immediately. Melissa sounded confused. Your mother-in-law said you were stepping away for the year. She said the baby had some health concerns and you didn't want to be pressured. When? Last week. We left you 2 voicemails after that. I had never heard them. Marjorie often charged everyone's phones on the kitchen counter because she complained about cords downstairs. I checked deleted voicemail. Empty. The position had already been offered to another teacher who had accepted. Melissa apologized. I could hear that she knew something was wrong, but the damage was done. I walked into the kitchen holding my phone. Marjorie was slicing strawberries. Did you tell my school I wasn't coming back? She did not stop cutting. They called while you were asleep. You told them I resigned. I told them your priorities changed. You had no authority to do that. Knife down, strawberry half finished. Then she looked at me. You keep talking about moving, working, putting Sadie in care with strangers. Someone had to think about what's best for her. You cost me my job. You have a job. Her eyes moved toward the baby monitor on the counter. Motherhood. I felt something inside me become very still. The fear did not disappear. It changed shape. For months, Marjorie had counted on me wanting her approval, Luke's agreement, enough money, the perfect moment. She had just destroyed one of the things I was waiting for. That made waiting less useful. I texted Danielle one word. Tonight. Then I went downstairs and began packing. I did not know Marjorie had overheard Luke promising me we would leave. I did not know she had already gone into the nursery that morning. And I did not know the memory card inside the camera was blank. The plan was to leave after dinner. I wanted Sadie fed, bathed, and strapped into her car seat before Marjorie understood what was happening. Danielle would meet me at a gas station 2 miles away, so I would not have to arrive at her apartment alone and unravel in the parking lot. But Sadie woke from her afternoon nap hot. At first, I blamed teething. By 8, her temperature was 101.8. I called the pediatric nurse line, gave infant acetaminophen according to the dose they confirmed, and spent the next several hours walking her around the basement. Marjorie came downstairs twice to complain about the crying. The first time I said, "She's sick." The second time, I did not answer. By 11:30, Sadie had finally dozed against me. I sat on the edge of the bed with my packed duffel at my feet and stared at the car keys on the dresser. I should have left then. Instead, I told myself I would wait 30 minutes and see whether the fever came down. At 12:17 a.m., Sadie woke screaming. The sound brought Marjorie down the stairs so fast, I heard her before I saw her. She appeared in the doorway, wearing a navy robe, gray hair loose around her face. Do something. I am. You've been letting her carry on for hours. She's running a fever. Then take her somewhere. I called the nurse. I'm monitoring it. Marjorie stepped into the room. Every night in this house revolves around that child screaming because you taught her it works. I turned away from her and shifted Sadie higher on my shoulder. Go upstairs, Marjorie. It was the first time I had ever ordered her out of a room in her own house. She heard it too. What did you say? I said go upstairs. You don't speak to me that way under my roof. Then we won't be under your roof anymore. The words were out. Marjorie looked at the duffel, then at the diaper bag, then at the car keys. Something in her face collapsed. You're taking her. Yes. You think Luke is going to let you run off with his child because you're having another episode. My episode is over. I moved toward the dresser. Marjorie blocked me. Move. No. Sadie cried harder between us. I said, do not touch me. Marjorie reached for the baby. I twisted away. Her hand caught my upper arm. I pulled free. Then she shoved me. Both palms, hard. My lower back struck the dresser corner. Pain flashed. My right arm opened on instinct as I tried to catch myself. Sadie's weight shifted. For half a second, I had the fabric of her sleeper in my fingers. Then I didn't. She fell sideways and hit the floor near the bed. She cried once. One sharp sound. Then nothing. I dropped to my knees. Sadie. Her eyes were open but unfocused. Behind me, Marjorie said, you dropped her. I looked up. She repeated it more firmly. You lost your balance and dropped her. That was the moment I understood there was no bottom. I picked Sadie up, grabbed my keys, and ran. Marjorie followed me to the garage. Erin, stop, you're hysterical. I buckled Sadie into the car seat with hands that would not cooperate. Listen to me, Marjorie said. If you go in there accusing people, they are going to look at you too. I shut the door. She slapped her palm against the roof of my car. You've been unstable for months. I backed out anyway. At the emergency entrance, a nurse took Sadie from me before I had finished saying her name. The next hour became fluorescent fragments. A pulse ox sensor. A tiny hospital gown. Questions repeated by different people. Did she lose consciousness? Was there vomiting? How far did she fall? Who witnessed it? I answered until my throat hurt. When the triage nurse asked who else had been in the room, I nearly said, my mother-in-law, and stopped. That pause still troubles me. Even with my daughter under hospital lights, some trained part of me wanted to minimize the family. Then I saw Marjorie's hands pushing into my shoulders again. Her grandmother, I said. My mother-in-law shoved me while I was holding her. The nurse's expression did not change, but she wrote something down. A pediatric emergency physician named Dr. Priya Shah came to me after 2 in the morning. Sadie had a small skull fracture and a minor subdural bleed. She was stable. Neurology expected observation, not surgery. I cried so hard with relief that I almost missed the next sentence. Because of Sadie's age and the circumstances, they had completed a skeletal survey. Dr. Shah pulled a chair close. There are 2 healing rib fractures on the left side. I stopped breathing. She explained that the fractures were not from the fall that night. They appeared older. My mind jumped through dates. The bruise. The locked room. The camera clip. The afternoons I had gone tutoring. The morning I had met Danielle. I heard myself say, she did this before. A social worker arrived, then a police officer, then another investigator from the child abuse unit. By sunrise, Marjorie had already begun telling her version. She came to the hospital carrying a stuffed rabbit and wearing a cream sweater as if she had dressed for sympathy. I saw her through the glass speaking with Detective Monica Ruiz. Marjorie cried into a tissue. She pointed toward me once. Later, Ruiz told me the substance of her statement. Marjorie said I had been emotionally erratic since the birth. She said I was sleep-deprived. She said she had worried about Sadie's bruising. She said she had heard me shout at the baby. She said I had packed bags after an argument with Luke and then dropped Sadie while storming around. Every distortion had a thread of truth attached. I had cried. I had been exhausted. I had packed bags. I had once raised my voice when Sadie screamed through an entire feeding. Marjorie had spent months collecting ordinary imperfections from my life and preserving them for exactly this purpose. The hospital's safety team did not know us. They knew only that a 4-month-old had unexplained older fractures, and 2 adults were accusing each other. For 48 hours, I was not allowed unsupervised contact with my daughter. I understood the policy. I also felt as if my skin had been removed. Danielle sat beside me through most of it. Luke arrived the next afternoon, pale from an overnight drive. He looked at the bruise forming across my shoulder and said, "What happened?" I stared at him. "What do you think happened?" He began to cry. Not loudly. Luke cried like he did everything else painful, then trying not to inconvenience anyone. I did not comfort him. Detective Ruiz asked whether there was any independent evidence from the house. The camera. I almost laughed from relief. Then I remembered something. The memory card. I had checked the camera app from the hospital while Sadie was in imaging. The local storage showed no recordings. When Danielle went with an officer to retrieve essentials, the card in the nursery camera had been wiped. Marjorie had found it. For about 10 minutes, I believed she had erased the only thing that could save us. Then Danielle asked, "Didn't you pay for cloud storage?" I looked at her. The old email account. I opened the app with shaking fingers. Cloud archive, active. 30 days. There were dozens of motion clips. Marjorie had deleted what she could touch. She had not deleted what had already left the house. Simone told me not to edit anything. We downloaded the files in original format, saved the account records, and turned access over to Detective Ruiz. I watched the clips only once before the police took copies. Once was enough. The video I had already seen was there. So was another from 3 weeks earlier. Marjorie lifted Sadie from the crib while she cried, held her against her chest, and compressed her body with both arms until the cry broke into a gasp. When Sadie continued, Marjorie shook her twice in short, angry motions. The timestamp lined up with the estimated age of the rib fractures. There were other clips, too. Marjorie covering the camera with a burp cloth for 20 minutes. Marjorie standing over the crib saying, "You don't run this house." Marjorie pinning Sadie's arms while forcing a bottle into her mouth. And finally, 12:17 a.m. The camera did not show the entire basement bedroom, but it showed enough. Me holding Sadie. Marjorie blocking the door. Her hands hitting my shoulders. My body striking the dresser. Sadie falling out of frame. The sound of impact. Then Marjorie's voice. "You dropped her." When Detective Ruiz watched it, she replayed the shove. Then she asked me to step outside. Marjorie was arrested the following afternoon. The arrest did not feel like victory. It felt like grief without its disguise. After investigators reviewed the footage and medical findings, the safety restriction on me was lifted. Sadie came back into my arms without a supervisor watching. I held her while she slept and stayed awake. Luke watched the full archive that night at Danielle's dining table. He started with his arms crow. Bess said. By the end, both hands covered his face. I defended her. I said nothing. I told you were tired. Still nothing. He looked at me. Why didn't I believe you? I knew several answers, and none of them would repair what his disbelief had cost us. I said, you need to answer that without making me responsible for helping you feel better. He nodded. It was the first boundary I gave him that he did not negotiate. He moved into a short-term rental 2 days later. Sadie and I stayed with Danielle. We did not separate legally. We also did not pretend the marriage had survived unchanged. Luke began therapy with a counselor who specialized in enmeshed families. He gave investigators a statement about Marjorie's control, the financial charge, the bruise I had shown him, and the warnings he had dismissed. Marjorie was released pending trial under strict no-contact conditions. Her sister, Patricia, became the family's messenger. The first texts were about forgiveness. The next were about Marjorie's health. Then came accusations. I was destroying an elderly woman's life. I had manipulated Luke. I had exaggerated an accident because I wanted the house. That last accusation almost impressed me. I had never wanted Marjorie's house. Soon, however, the house became exactly what they offered me. By late autumn, prosecutors had offered Marjorie a plea agreement on felony injury to a child and misdemeanor battery. The video made a trial risky for her. The remaining fight was over sentencing. That was when Patricia invited Luke and me to meet at a coffee shop. I nearly refused. Simone advised me to listen and promise nothing. Patricia arrived with a folder. Marjorie would transfer the house into a trust for Sadie and pay the medical bills insurance had not covered. In return, the family wanted Luke and me to ask the prosecutor for probation and for me to decline a victim impact statement. Patricia slid a sheet of numbers across the table. Hospital balance, follow-up neurology, physical therapy, attorney fees, housing costs. Then the estimated value of Marjorie's house. Luke stared at the paper. I did too. For 10 ugly minutes, the offer worked on me. A house could give Sadie stability. The medical debt could disappear. I could stop calculating every grocery trip. Luke could stop working extra rotations. We could build something out of the wreckage. Then I understood the transaction. They were offering my daughter security in exchange for making what happened to her smaller. Luke said quietly, "We should at least think about it." I looked at him. He flinched before I spoke. "We can think about money," I said. "We do not bargain with the truth." Patricia's face hardened. "Your daughter gains nothing from her grandmother going to prison. She gains a mother who did not teach her that accountability disappears when the person who hurt you owns property." I left. That night, I still cried over the numbers. Refusing was not noble or easy. It was expensive. At sentencing, Marjorie's attorney used the only part of the archive he thought could shame me. He played a clip of me putting Sadie safely in the crib during a long crying spell and stepping into the hallway for 90 seconds while I pressed both hands to my face. He called it evidence that everyone in the house had been overwhelmed. When I stood to speak, I did not defend myself as a perfect mother. I said I had been exhausted. I said I had cried. I said there were moments when I had put my daughter somewhere safe because I needed a minute to regulate myself. Then I described the difference between stepping away from a baby to prevent harm and using a baby's helplessness to demand obedience. I told the judge about the old letters I had found, not to excuse Marjorie, but to explain what terrified me most. Someone taught her that suffering becomes authority, I said. She learned that if she endured cruelty, the next woman should endure it too. I cannot change what happened to her. I can decide what reaches my daughter. Marjorie looked at me then. For the first time in months, she did not look composed. The judge sentenced her to 3 years in state custody, with part of the term eligible for review, and extended the no-contact order protecting Sadie and me. No one applauded. I did not feel victorious. I felt finished with asking permission. 9 months later, Sadie and I live in a small 2-bedroom apartment in Boise with uneven cabinet doors and a balcony that faces a parking lot. My name is on the lease. Danielle lives 15 minutes away and has a key because I chose to give her one. Sadie's latest neurological exam was normal. She still sees a physical therapist, but her progress is good. She crawls toward danger with the confidence of someone who assumes an adult will stop her gently. Luke lives nearby. He comes for bath nights, pediatric appointments, and the boring parts of parenting that cannot be. Performed for an audience. We are still married, but rebuilding trust has been slower than either of us imagined. I no longer accept apologies that arrive without changed behavior. He knows that. Marjorie has written twice. I have opened neither letter. Maybe one day I will. Maybe I won't. Forgiveness, if it ever comes, will not be a key back into my home. The most important family lesson Sadie will inherit from me is not that relatives deserve endless chances. It is that love and access are different things. Blood can explain a bond. It cannot excuse harm. I used to think strong boundaries were something cold people built. Now I think they are doors with working locks, and the person inside gets to decide who enters. If this story brought someone to mind who has been taught to confuse endurance with love, send it to them. Tell me in the comments what boundary changed your life, subscribe to After Silence Stories, and come back for the next story.